Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing paradoxes, what Carl Jung thinks about paradoxes, and how does this relate to the personality typology community. And by that community, I'm really discussing anyone that's interested in Jungian theory, Jungian cognitive functions, and all that. Because I think anyway, let me just get to it, guys. Is that what sort of inspired this video? I've been thinking about paradoxes a lot lately, and a couple of years ago, before I even really was making a lot of videos, I made a random video about paradoxes and how I view them when searching for truth. And somebody commented and was like, you know that Carl Jung talks about this a lot, right? And I was like, no, I had no idea. And I mean, those of you guys who are interested in Dave Superpower's objective personality system, I'm pretty low consume. So that was pretty interesting to me to be like, okay, I did not even realize that was a thing, and that I apparently agree with him. So just to be, I've looked up some quotes of how Carl Jung defines paradoxes, and so I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for my opinion. So I'm not claiming to know everything there is to know about this topic, because I'm sure there's more. But a paradox is a statement that may be true but seems to say two opposite things. A person or thing can seem to be contradictory, inconsistent in their action or condition, yet still be true. And this, I find the aspects of life that are the most contradictory to be the most interesting to me personally, because that's when you really get into the unknown. That's when you really dive into this esoteric shit that I freaking love. And you know, I probably sound really contradictory to a lot of you guys sometimes, and you're not wrong. I am contradictory. But let's talk about this. Jung believed that a paradox can do more justice to the unknowable than clarity can do. Here's a quote. Non-ambiguity and non-contradiction are one-sided and thus not suited to express the incomprehensible. So I personally believe that personality theory is pretty people and how they work. It's pretty incomprehensible. If you think about it, there are people that are well known that everybody has a different opinion of their type. I mean, we sit here and debate this stuff all day long. Let's not act like it's something that's simple. We all know that humans are, weird. We're a little bit irrational. We don't always act logically. And so if we're just looking at the logical aspect of how human beings behave, I think we're doing a major disservice to actually understanding what a human being is, what even is a personality, how do people act together, all those sorts of things. So the word paradox comes from the two Greek words para and dokein. I don't know how to say that. And it means to seem contrary. The statement may be true, but seems to say two opposing things. So, yes, it might be true, but it seems to say two opposing things. Now, let's think about some examples. Can anyone think about some examples of two opposing forces? I think I know. I think that, Isabel Myers, or whatever her name is, of the Myers-Briggs can think of some. It's called feeling and thinking, sensing and intuition, extroversion and introversion, judging and perceiving. Those are seemingly contradictory things, wouldn't you say? And here are some examples that Jung actually has of paradoxes. The physical and the intellectual. The virtues and vices. Corruptible and incorruptible. Visible and invisible. Spirit and body. Life and death. Good and evil. Truth and falsehood. Unity and multiplicity. Poverty and riches. War and peace. Conqueror and conquered, toil and repose, sleep and waking, childhood and old age, male and female, strong and weak, hell and paradise. those things that are and those things that are not, those things that may be spoken of and those which may not be spoken of, black and white, cold and hot, dry and moist. I mean, to me, when I look at this, the first thing that I think is that it seems like duality is a major part of what a paradox is. And if we live in a universe where duality is a reality, then yeah, there's gonna be different viewpoints. I'm sorry if I'm screaming, like I just get very passionate. I'm not trying to be like, I'm right, guys. I'm just like, I get very excited about this stuff. Yeah, there's gonna be different viewpoints. If feeling exists and thinking exists, that to me is a duality that is present in this universe. It seems to me like people are not, or people have reasons, but they also have emotions, you know? And to me, what I find super interesting is what Carl Jung talks about, diving into the shadow and the individuation process and stuff like that, and other, you know, the whole idea of the ego. I think that our ego and our consciousness is only aware of like one part, well, by default. You know, when we talk about what our personality type is, our ego is conscious of, you know, the functions that we value, but that doesn't mean that the functions that we don't value don't exist and aren't playing a major role. And I think that that's why, you know, people do seem really paradoxical, because even if I am saying like I'm a feeler, I'm coming at it from this like feeling perspective, like I still have logic whether or not I am conscious of it or not. And I think thinkers have emotions, whether, you know, whether or not you're conscious of it or not, whether or not it goes into your decision making, it's still there and available for all the feelers to see. And I'm going to get into that more in a second. Feel free to disagree with that if you don't agree. A paradox can do more justice to the unknowable than clarity can do. Okay, so my opinion is that whenever people are like, here's the answer, I know the answer, this is the only answer, I automatically just shut down. I don't agree. I automatically do not agree. Now, that's my opinion. I'm not even saying you should sit here and listen to me and be like, oh, you need to like look more into paradoxes. The way that I see it is that there's, with any given situation, like let's look at perceiving. With any given situation, people could be viewing at that from an NI, NE, SE, or SI lens. And depending on who you are, you're going to see the situation completely differently. And even if you are using the same functions, you still are going to be looking at it through the lens of you as a human and your past experiences and your worldview and the lens to which you're seeing the world. I personally believe that NI and SI are the functions that are most responsible for that lens. Whereas, you know, because they're subjective, you know, subjective functions are seen through the subject and is very interconnected to the subject, versus objective functions being more self-evident and undeniable in the external world. But we all have that interplay of both subjective and objective going on, and that's why we all could be biased, but we also all can see things clearly if we choose. That's like another paradox here. And so I've noticed a lot in typology communities how people that share the same functions will see oftentimes see a situation the same way, and then look at somebody else and be like, how the hell are you seeing that? Because I'm seeing this. And to me, that's where it gets extremely interesting. Because whenever I get this, where I'm like, man, I really disagree with this person, but these group of people all seem to see where they're coming from. And then my group of people all seem to see where I'm coming from. That is so fascinating to me, because to me, that shows that I'm not right, they're not right. This is just a big old paradox that we are all wrapped up into. Here's a quote. I'll link the article where I found this information below because I don't have it on me right now. It was from, I think, Jungian spiritual science or something like that. But it says, we don't like mind cramps. We recoil from confronting contradictions. We avoid situations that affront our reason. In this, our cultural bias serves us poorly because much of the richness of life is found in the transcendental realms of life. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate and like talking too quickly. Paradox helps us navigate through these realms, and Jung would urge us to develop our spiritual muscles and hone our psychological insight so as to appreciate the value of a paradox. I completely agree that it is a spiritual muscle and a spiritual skill to be able to see things to this degree. One could say it requires a high vibration, if you're into that. Here's another quote. For spiritual weaklings, paradoxes can be more than they can be. It takes, oh my gosh, it's so windy. It takes spiritual strength to sustain paradoxes, and those with such strength, paradox can provide the highest degree of certainty. So here's what I see. I personally believe that the lesser developed people, that's just my opinion, and Jung would call this, spiritually weak, whatever you want to say. Lesser developed people have a tendency to want to see things one way. And Graves' theory of spiral dynamics talks about this. The lower levels of individual, they're more likely to be closed-minded and think my way over your way, or this over that. And I am not a this over that person. I am a both sort of person. I'm a yes and sort of person. That's how I see the world. I'm not trying to brag about that either. I just personally believe that when we are talking about these sorts of things, to me it seems impossible to not recognize the paradoxical relation between feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuition, because I think in any given situation, like I said, there are 4 different perceiving functions that somebody could be viewing it through, and there are 4 different judging functions that somebody could be judging it through, or judging it by. And what I noticed many times is that a TE user, for example, can make a very valid argument with TE that, deserves to be heard, but it completely contradicts where I'm coming from. But that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It means that they are judging the world through a completely different standard. And if we think that we are judging the world by the same standard, I think that we are doing a major disservice in our understanding. And if we think that we are seeing the world as the same picture, I think that we are doing a major disservice, and we won't be able to understand each other if we continue on thinking that whatever I'm seeing that you're seeing, because to me that's where the misunderstandings lie. That's where the disagreements stem from, is not only are we seeing something completely different, but we're judging it by a different standard. And so I tend to really relate with and understand other NFJs more than others, because I see the standard, I'm working with the same standard, and I'm working with the same, sort of perception, where as an NI user, everything that I am seeing in the world, I am trying to create meaning out of, meaning that's special to me, meaning that has always seemed true time and time again throughout my life. It's organizing the concepts, organizing the ideas to really find the idea that really speaks to me and what seems to be where meaning could be found for me in this life. And whenever I'm talking to other NJs, I can tell that that's what they're doing as well. They're trying to look to the root of the issue, and they're trying to see where the seeds are being planted. They're trying to plant their seeds now into the future. And whether or not I agree with them or not, I at least can recognize that that's what they're doing, and that if we come to a different conclusion, it's fine. But I notice with NPs, for example, they oftentimes feel like either I'm twisting like the reality, or I'm lying, or like I'm not quite sure. I mean, if you're an NP, like I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, but I think my disregard for SI and the fact that I'm not even talking about SI can make it sound like I'm twisting the reality. But the thing is, it's like, yeah, I am. Like NI and SI are a paradox when you put them together. Like when my memory, what I recall from my life is the meaning that I took away from that event. And that meaning is entirely subjective. Like I had a college experience, and as opposed to looking back and remembering like how it looked and how it smelled and how it, some like pictures moving in my head. I mean, I don't really have pictures moving in my head. I'm not going to say that that's an NI thing, but I'm curious what you think. Personally, I cannot even, I've tried to have a memory that moves in my head, and I don't really know how to do that personally. Like whenever I look back, I'm looking back at the lessons learned, I'm looking at the meaning that I took from the event. I'm looking at the checkpoints of my life and how this led to that, which led to that. And for me, whenever I'm talking about my story, what I believe, who I am now, you're going to see all of that bias weaved in, because it is coming from my perspective, and it is coming from, NI is biased. It's the lens to which that I see reality. It's not, and SI users will sort of really source from the sensory world in this tangible, practical way that I don't do. And that's why it's a paradox, is that I'm right and they're right. And that's like sort of the name of the game with diving into these personality things. It's like FE is right and so's TE. Like SE is right and so's NE. And I mean, if we can really put those things together, then that's really expansive. Here's a couple more quotes from Carl Jung. He said, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." He says, "The paradox reflects a higher level of intellect, and by not forcibly representing the unknown as known, gives a more faithful picture of the real state of affairs." This is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to say, I'm not going to try and like use FE and say that my way is right over yours, and I don't think that you should use TE and say that my FE way is wrong. The paradox is one of our most valued spiritual possessions. Paradox is the natural medium for expressing transconscious facts. And I looked up what transconscious meant, and I couldn't find much about that. I'm assuming it means anything that's beyond the conscious, so the unconscious, anything like that. And I would assume that would relate to sort of, our demon function, or whatever you want to call it, like the functions that we don't have conscious or valued in our cognitive stack. I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts about this. I don't think it's fair to hold people by your standards. I mean, unless you are going to be holding people by your standards and letting them hold you by theirs, if that makes sense. So in order for me to go around and say, oh, that was mean to FE, that was rude, if I'm going to do that, then I expect you to hold me to the standard of sourcing my material, being logical, all that, yada, yada, yada with TE. Like, I get it. It's important. And if I'm going to sit here and say that what I think is important, then I should learn from TE users, and I think vice versa. If TE users are saying that I have to be more logical or I need a system, then you need to think about something that is actually going to be meaningful for people and actually help them. So that could be a paradox, Like, that could definitely be a paradox there. And I mean, I don't think that the definitions of personality type as we know it right now are very fair at all. Because, like, here's just an example, and I'm going to leave it at this. Is oftentimes in the personality community, I hear about FE DOMs as being sort of sheep and like following the crowd and all that. They're following the emotions of others. But at the same time, I hear about TE DOMs as telling people what to do, telling people what to think, commanding the room, being brilliant and all of this. Here's the thing, both of those things are true, but that is an inconsistency, because with FE, it could follow the vibes of the room, or it could direct the energy of the room, it could direct the emotions of the room, it could make you feel things, it could make you feel better. And TE, it could make you, it could teach you those logical things, but it also could be sheep, and it also can follow whatever people said. It could follow any argument that sounds about right. And it's not fair the way in a lot of these definitions that we are taking our own preferences and our own standards, and we're measuring the reality we see up against our standards, rather than trying to get all of the standards on the same, like, put it on the same playing field. Because if you're gonna put, like, it's clearly a TE user that would say that, because it's their TE standard is judging FE as less, and it is less by a TE standard. If you're looking at efficiency, FE is not as efficient. If you're looking at mutual benefit, then TE is not efficient. And so, I don't know, it really just grinds my gears when people are holding me to a TE standard when that's not even my goal. My goal is mutual benefit. My goal is community. My goal is conversation. My goal is self-growth and the growth of humanity. My goal is not to make something efficient. And here, the thing is that I want to learn from that without not being me. And that's the paradox in life. And these are the inconsistencies that we need to be, that we need to allow, in my opinion. Because it's one thing, I think that the inconsistencies are a big deal. Okay, how to know the difference between if something's a paradox or if you are just being a hypocrite, I think has everything to do with how open you are to being wrong. If you are open and you are including the other perspectives with your perspective while also standing firm in what your perspective is, to me that is allowing the paradox to come through and allowing yourself to observe what reality is. But if you were saying, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, to literally everything that you hear, and having this closed mindset, I don't have the definition on me, but I know that Graves' theory of spiral dynamics has good definitions of what I mean by closed that you should look up. But yeah, like, I think that's doing everyone a disservice if you were saying, you know, this is the correct way without allowing that, because at any given situation, there are, in my opinion, 8 different cognitive functions, you know, that you can look at it through. 4 different ways to see it, 4 different ways to judge it and to measure it by, and 16 different ways to inhibit those combinations, and then a multitude of more other ways, like to slice those people up, because there's millions of people in each cluster of a personality type. And if you're looking for personality type to be your identity, I would look elsewhere, because there's millions of other people that share your type code, and referring to yourself as, like, viewing yourself through that lens, I think is a little bit limiting. And yeah, anyway, I hope this was an interesting video for you all. If you would like to have more conversations like this, join my Facebook group, Personality Typology for Self-Growth. Also, my good friend Kat, who's an ENFJ, runs a Discord that is called Transcendence. I'm going to link that below. If you are interested in chatting about self-growth and personality systems, including Enneagram and Socionics, go join that Discord if you're already a Discord lover. And thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day.